Good afternoon and welcome. We are sitting this afternoon in Don Harris's living room, getting ready to talk to him in anticipation and celebration of his 90th birthday coming up. We have questions from the museum, and we have lots of questions that have come in to us through social media of things that you all want to ask him. So that's what we're going to do today. And we'll look forward to hearing his answers. Don?
Thank you. That was a nice introduction.
Okay, let's start with, how about if you tell us a little bit about where you were born, when, and a little bit about yourself growing up and your family.
Yeah, I was born in Booneville, Indiana. That's a county seat of Warwick County that I grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
But the town that I grew up in was called Elberfeld, a little German settlement. Half the people there spoke German when we first moved in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I had a great childhood in Elberfeld, Indiana. And even though I've been in Kentucky since 1970,
Mm-hmm.
and I've enjoyed every minute of it, but the old Hoosier comes out of me. I'm still a Hoosier. Jim Aikman was a Hoosier, so we always, every time we saw each other, we had a nice Hoosier conversation.
Oh, that's fun.
Now my voice is going to be a little bad today, but I think it's going to be all right.
It'll be fine. It'll be fine, I'm sure. So you moved to Kentucky in 1970. Was that with your whole family?
And well, not my parents. My parents stayed in Indiana,
Okay.
but Roz and I, my first wife,
Mm-hmm.
we came here in 1970. Now I'll tell you how we wound up in Kentucky. The Crabtrees had a client, the Wagner, Mrs. Wagner, and her daughter Wendy. So they moved some horses over to me over in Indiana, and they, in the conversation, they said, you know, we've got some land, a farm right across the street from Crabtrees. Would you be interested in coming over and build a new barn and all that?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, I'm doing pretty good where I am, but I'll think about it. So I thought about it and talked with Roz about it, and we made the move, and it was a good thing. It was a good thing. But I had moved from my little barn in Elberfeld, Indiana, to Owensboro. A group of businessmen built me a big, nice barn. I had a nice barn in Indiana before I left, and we had our own heat. There was a gas well on the farm, so we had free gas.
So you had a warm barn.
We had, yeah. So I've been fortunate on every barn I've been in. I've had nice heat. And
That's certainly a plus.
Yeah.
It's cold in Kentucky.
and it spoils you because you go visiting to a barn and horse shopping. You realize how lucky you are to have that heat.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I can see why. So where is that the farm now that is Premier Stables now, where you used to be? Your farm on Shelbyville Road.
Shelbyville Road.
Mm-hmm.
When I first came, the Wagners built me that barn where, well, this copper coin farm.
Uh-huh.
You notice the sign?
Yes.
That was my first stop.
Uh-huh.
And then, this sounds crazy, but the Wagners and I had a good relationship.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, she gave me 10 acres to build a home on.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see it. It's a big colonial home,
Mm-hmm.
just to the side of the farm. So that was pretty nice.
Oh, yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
my second one was where Rob and Sarah are now. That was my
At
second
Premier
one.
Stables now, right, that's what, I didn't realize there was one in between.
Built that barn
Mm-hmm,
and sold it to Rob and Sarah, and then moved down to the Greenbergs. Had a fancy farm
oh, okay.
where Steve Wheeler is now.
Uh-huh, yeah, sure.
That was my second barn.
Oh, my goodness,
And,
you've got lots of barns.
yeah, so I've been lucky to have some nice barns. Then the third barn was all on the Shelbyville Road, on the same side of the road,
Mm-hmm,
maybe 2 miles apart. That's
uh-huh, yeah.
my third barn was up the road, what we call the Charlie Smith barn. He
Mm-hmm,
built that about the same time I built my, about the time I built the where Rob and Sarah are
Uh-huh.
now. And
Yeah.
anyway, I've been on 3 different farms on the
Mhm.
same side of the road, like 2 miles apart.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And, the Charlie Smith barn, that's what I'm
Right,
getting
right.
around to.
Yeah,
We moved down there. In fact, my son Stan bought it. I helped him buy that place.
mm-hmm,
And boy, he worked his tail off because he was in pretty bad shape.
mm-hmm.
But he fixed that thing up. And we had some nice horses.
Mm-hmm.
And in the in that barn, I put stainless steel around. Imperator always had like a big stall and a half,
Oh, uh-huh,
and I put stainless steel on around his tailboard,
mm-hmm,
and up the poles, what would have been a pole,
mm-hmm,
and then Mr. Greenberg, he had a mare called New Estate. She was an undefeated world champion.
mm-hmm.
So he saw that stainless steel on Paris stalls. He said, "I'd like to have that on there," so I had to put on. Then the next step, Mrs. Wagner had mink put on her halters.
Oh, my goodness.
So Mr. Greenberg saw that, and he came up and had put sable on his halters. So he was a good customer, and but he always wanted to be the best, you see.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. These were spoiled horses.
Yeah, so he had a nice wife, good-looking, nice woman, and she had Crohn's disease,
Mm-hmm.
and really bad. So I found a horse down in Tennessee called Magic Marvel that I really liked. So we flew down there in a private plane and bought the horse, Magic Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
He was, I tried to make a stake horse out of him, but deep down I knew he wasn't quite a stake horse.
Uh-oh.
But I wasn't going to tell anybody that. So we sold him to Cynthia Wood in California as an amateur horse, amateur ladies. So he never did get beat in that division. And I knew that was his division, but I wasn't going to advertise it because he won everywhere else. But though, I think he was third in the championship there. And so that covers my barns on Shelbyville Road.
Yeah.
And that's the mink and the sable and the stainless steel.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, that was a fancy stall, stainless steel all.
I bet, that was something.
It was nice.
So how old were you when you decided that you wanted to be in the horse business for your
Okay,
career?
let me tell you, I grew up like all kids. I had a nice pony to ride.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like 5 years old. And we did show, and there was a little Indiana shows,
Yeah.
showing the pleasure pony class. So that's the way I started, like most kids do.
Mm-hmm.
And then I stepped up to to a gaited pony, Welch pony, and he was my next step up, and so we'd have to show they didn't have 5 gaited pony classes at those little shows.
Right.
So my dad was quite a character, and he'd get a hold of the announcer before the show, and he said, my son's going to show in that pleasure pony class, but that pony's he's a racking pony. And said, I want you to make that announcement. So the announcers called out the name and said, ladies and gentlemen, this is a racking pony. So I'd fly around that ring of racking, and I think that's maybe where some of my showing off stuff came later on.
Your showmanship.
Making those extra passes. So that little showmanship, I guess you might say, started way back then. And I even remember the show was Princeton, Indiana.
Oh.
See, all those towns, they were towns of like, 4,000 or 5,000 population, and they all had horse shows. We had horse shows anywhere we go. So that's something that the horse business is missing nowadays.
Or those small shows that are
Those
for everybody.
small shows. And so then L.S. Dickey had a big stable in French Lick, Indiana. So when we got ready to graduate to horses, the only place we knew was to go to French Lick to L.S. Dickey's. So he kept me in horses for several years, each year a little bit better. And where we were going, we were winning about everything where we went. So then we kind of outgrew Dickie a little bit because he was going to downsize of his career. And then back in those days, every time you'd pick up a magazine, you'd see Art Simmons on the front cover.
Yes.
Art Simmons, and a big top hat on with these on the walk trot horses. So we started going to Mexico, Missouri in 1949 or 50.
Wow.
And we, every time we went there, we bought something because he had so many horses. So that was Art Simmons' barn was a big stepping stone for me. I mean, he just really nice horses, and so that's kind of stepping stone from Dickey's to there. And L.S. Dickey was he took me in like a son. He thought a lot of me, and I thought a lot of him. But when I'd go to his barn, he'd put me on, I mean,
everything
maybe
like
20
that.
horses.
Yeah, wow.
And I was giving him some free training, and he was giving me some free training. So I had a good education in French Lick, Indiana, and I still have good memories from French Lick. It was a resort town at that time, and all the movie stars and all the big time golfers had 2 golf courses. So I was in a little small restaurant in French Lick, having a cheeseburger probably, and Bing Crosby comes in, and he goes to the jukebox, and he played every song that he had on.
Oh my goodness.
Now, Bing Crosby may be a little too far back for some young people, but he was the Frank Sinatra of his day.
Absolutely.
And Bob Hope, he'd come into this little town, and then the celebrities would come in by rail and
Wow.
stay at the hotel and play golf. And so I've got really fond memories of French Lick. In fact, a few months ago, before this virus,
Right.
me and Judy and our caretaker, I share a caretaker with Judy,
Right.
or Judy shares with me. And we went to French Lick, and my niece, I've got a favorite niece, met us there, and a nephew. So we had the nicest time, and we ate out under, have you ever been to French Lick in West Baden?
I have not.
Well, the West Baden, they're just like, you know, they run into one another. But West Baden, at one time, might still be had the biggest, largest dome in the world.
Wow.
So we had lunch out under that
Under
dome,
that dome.
and brought back a lot of memories. But that just Indiana, you know, I'm like I say, Jim Aikman and I, we stayed Hoosiers all this year.
Well, that's still
But
home. Yeah.
Kentucky has been so good to us, and I'm just glad we moved. But without a little push from Mrs. Wagner, I might still be over
You might
Indiana.
still be there. That's
Yeah.
right.
But now Wendy Wagner, she still runs the barn and still shows some ponies and whatnot, and in the breeding business. But that was a beautiful barn, and it had what you call radiant heat. It was like riding in the sunlight. These
Wow.
reflectors up here, boy, it was nice and warm.
My goodness.
So we went all out on that. That sounds crazy, but everybody wants to sell horses.
Sure.
But it got so busy. I had vans coming in there all day and all night, and it got to be too much activity for Mrs. Wagner. She did so. That's kind of unusual because most owners they want to sell all they can sell.
Right.
But that was a great sales barn, and I sold so many horses. And back then, guess they still do, but you'd everybody'd brag a little bit and put all the sales in a magazine. So I'd have maybe like 2 pages of sales, sold. And so that helped build my reputation as a dealer. And so that's when I moved down to the Greenberg, where Steve Wheeler is now.
Wow.
But that was the Wagners, they had some top horses, and they were so good to me. Like I told you, they gave me 10 acres to build on.
Right.
And I built a beautiful colonial home. If it was white, it looked like a White House.
Oh, yeah.
So those are just some things that run through my mind, but there'd be a lot of things pop in my mind before we quit here.
Someone in our vast social media audience out there for the museum wants to know, what was the hardest class you ever showed in?
The hardest class.
Hardest class.
Well, that would have been Louisville. Second workout with Skywatch. That was about as tough as you get.
Yeah.
And those were days that we hadn't seen before, and we may never see them again. Those 2 horses battled, and you couldn't. The crowd, they were up to the rafters too.
That's back when
had
it was
crowds
full, wasn't it?
up to the rafters. If you didn't have a ticket on Saturday night, you're not going to get in.
Wow.
So that crowd was so loud, you couldn't hardly hear the announcer what he was saying. You'd have to kind of strain to hear what he was saying. That's how loud it was. I always, oh my gosh.
It's the doorbell.
I always said we blew the roof off the place.
I bet you did.
That's what we did. And Mitch and I were, we had some good battles, but we were always good, clean.
Yeah, it was
We
was
weren't-
respectful competition.
Yeah, and so now Skywatch, the first year that he beat Imperator, I found out from Mitch later on, he had studied every DVD that's ever made of my horse. So that was smart.
He was ready.
He studied that horse and kind of outsmarted me a little bit. I'd go to the rail and he was out in the, cutting the curves out in the middle. And I was getting a lot of miles in, a lot more miles on my horse than he did.
Yeah,
So he had a good game plan.
sounds like it.
And it worked. And I give him credit for having that plan. And, but those were the good old days. Now I'm gonna back up a little bit about Skywatch. Excuse my voice, I'm having trouble.
That's fine.
I went to Kansas City to spectate. And I saw Skywatch he was a junior horse. And my gosh, he was so outstanding. So I came home and I told the owners, the meaners that owned the Imperator, I said, we're gonna have some competition next year. I mean, we'd had competition, good competition, but this was a little different category. And they, oh no, nobody can beat Perry. Nobody can beat Perry. I said, well, we'll just have to wait and see, because I tell you, he's gonna be tough to beat. So that's a little bit more of the Skywatch story. He was, now, a lot of people don't know this, but Skywatch, Rob Tanner from California moved up here. And he was a top horseman, he was a good horseman. But some way or other, he didn't get along with Skywatch. They shipped him to Rob, and he just didn't get along. So he kind of got lost in California.
Oh.
And they finally smartened up and sent him to Mitch. And so that was good for Mitch, but bad for me, because I had clear sailing without him.
That's funny, that's funny.
Yeah.
So you stayed rivals, I guess.
Uh-huh.
You continue to be rivals, I'm sure.
Yeah. You know, now I'm naturally I've retired, but Mitch is still competing. Now, Mitch was the youngest trainer to ever win it, and that was good. But when I had to wait on mine, and so he had a long dry spell before he had a really nice horse. So that's one advantage of winning it a little later. I didn't have that kind of a wait.
Right.
But Mitch is still competing. But boy, I know he'd like to have a Skywatch.
Sure.
And he hadn't had anything close to it. Or nobody else. But there's some outstanding horses right now.
Sure.
But Skywatch and Perry, we call him, they were up here on another level.
Yeah, they were really unique
And most
special.
people that have went through those days will agree with me.
I bet so. Yeah, I bet so. When did you start training? Is that
Okay,
that's been your
basketball was my first love for a long time. And I had my basketball days and went to college a couple of years, and driving back and forth to a small school and working some horses. So I decided wanted to be a horse trainer rather than a basketball coach. And so
Yeah.
we had this 17 stall barn right behind our house where I did this training. Am I speaking loud enough, you think? Okay. So I was training out of that little barn and with some horses. Where we were going, we were winning.
Yeah.
In other words, for years I was a big fish in a little pond, and that was good training. And now, and the training that I had on that, I'm jumping over to Southern Illinois now.
Sure.
That was a good circuit. They had horses that the state put up half the money, so yeah, I came home with some money at the end of the year.
Yeah, that's nice.
Because we were winning, you know about all those classes. So you never knew who was going to be judging the shows. You'd have to go to the secretary's office and see who's judging. So the week before that show, the judge beat a mare that we'd been winning everything with. River's Copper Sheen. We bought her from the Crabtrees before they ever thought about being in Kentucky. And oh, my dad, we all were good sports. He trained me to be a good sport. But rather than jumping on that judge about beating the mare that'd been winning everything, he walked up to him and handed him a dollar bill. And the judge backed up and said, well, now, what is that for? And he said, well, that was back in the penny postcard days.
Right.
Said, anywhere you're going to be judging, you send me a penny postcard and I won't be there. So now who in the world but my dad, he was a character, would think about something. But then the next week, those shows were all a week apart, 20 miles apart. So it was a great experience. The next week, we were over in Marion, Illinois. And I said, who's the judge? And they said, Pete Bogster, that's the guy's name. So I called my dad and I said, well, you're never going to guess old Pete Bogster's judging this show. He said, well, you're already there and set up, just stick it. So we showed 9 times and won 9 blues.
Oh, wow.
So
You got the message.
yeah.
You needed to be fair. That's cute.
So my dad he wasn't a saddlebred trainer, but he trained mules in the coal mine. Little mules about this tall.
Wow.
And through the underground mines as a kid. And you didn't have lines to drive. There was G and Haw. G was turn left and Haw was right. Those mules knew that. So that's so he had that. And then as a young guy, all of his neighbors, all these wild horses that they wanted to get broke, they'd send to my dad. By that time he was like a teenager, and he'd break those horses. So he was a horseman, but he never did get into he did show a fine harness some and did real well. But he was a natural born, just a horseman.
So you got it honestly from your dad.
Well, that's true.
Sounds like.
And my mom, I never did see her ride, but they tell me she was an outstanding equestrian. And she was riding a horse, and just a young girl, and they didn't have the girth tightened up, and it slipped and she fell off, and that horse stepped on her head.
Oh.
So the rest of her life, she carried a perfect hoof print in her
Oh my
head.
goodness.
I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, a hoof print right in there.
Wow.
And then she got the whooping cough. So every time she'd cough, the stitches would pop out.
Oh my goodness.
So, you know, I heard that she was, you know, really good at rider. You know.
Goodness.
So that's that story.
All right. What would you tell someone? What would your advice be to help someone become a better horseman, horsewoman, a better rider? I mean, is it practice? Is it riding horses that are tough for you to ride? I mean, what helps you become a better rider?
Practice, practice, practice. You can't beat the practice. And then if you've got an instructor, a good instructor you have faith in, listen to him or her and do what they say. Instructors are really important, and we got some good ones now.
Okay, I think that's certainly reasonable. Who would you classify as your all-time favorite mount?
All right.
That's tough, isn't it?
I've had a bunch, but I have to put Imperator
Number one.
He was just a different horse. And then I put, this is a close call, Giddy Up Go. He was an outstanding horse, a crowd catcher, and he'd be my number two. And then number three would be prize contender. I'd like to have him a little sooner. I got him when he had a little age on him. But what a horse he was. He was a horse that he was a little hard to balance. When I talk about balance, is he'd have a little too much weight in front. You might have to lighten up and make it a little easier for him. And Jimmy Robertson came by my barn. That's when I was up at the old Charlie Smith barn. And he saw that horse work. He said, "Boy, don't change anything about Lexington time." He said, "That horse, just keep everything like you got it." So we go to Lexington. And I worked there one morning, and boy, he was just doing everything. But I hadn't cantered him with that extra. I had a little extra weight on him, and I hadn't cantered him. He cantered so high he couldn't canter. He'd try, but then he'd fly out of it. So I had to go to the blacksmith shop the next morning and lighten him up. And I'm going to skip a little bit.
That's okay.
At Louisville, he had, I felt like he was still a little bit heavy. So old Bud Williman, my blacksmith, rather than change his shoes, he took the grinder and ground about 3 ounces off of that shoe.
Oh, wow.
And we didn't have to change the shoe, just ground it off, and boy, he was something else.
And it was good to go.
Yeah. Now, prize contender, he's the first horse to ever win the American Royal, the first $50,000 stake winner at the Royal. And boy, what a show he put on.
I bet.
And in New York, I mean, that New York crowd, they went crazy about him. He was just so outstanding. And a lot of times when a horse has a lot of hock, it's hard for him to rack. And how he racked with all that hock action, but boy, he racked. You didn't see any pace in him, but he pump nose hocks like pistons. So, so he would be my, you know, I told you, when you go to talking about protege, he's never mentioned in the same breath with Imperator. But he was a lot like him, not quite with his ears, that's the only thing that could fault a little bit. But he was a Triple Crown winner, so he had to be pretty good.
He had to be pretty nice, yes.
Yeah, so that was, that, let's see, we got Prize. I mean, we got Imperator and Prize.
Giddy.
Huh?
Giddy.
And Giddy. And Protege. Now
Those are your top four.
that's some outstanding gaited horses. And now I've had some more that
Did you have one that you just, they may not have been the magic horse in the show ring, but you just loved their personality and loved them at the barn?
yeah,
Who would that be?
that would be Perry, because I made a pet out of him.
That's wonderful.
When I'd open that door, he'd come.
He knew.
I'd give him a little treat.
Yeah.
Now that opens up another story. He's the first saddlebred to go into the Hall of Champions at the Horse Park. And he, excuse me just a minute. What we were on?
We were talking about Perry at the horse park.
Oh, the Horse Park.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting around to. He'd been in that horse park for 3 or 4 years. And I'd walk up to that fence and I didn't have to clap my hands.
He knew.
I didn't have to whistle. I didn't do anything. He'd come running up to me, put his head right in my chest. Now, you know,
That's because you were his person.
we don't know how smart horses are, but it used to make me mad about, there's an old talk show, Jack Power, and he'd have different guests on. And there's a guest on there talking about horses not being smart. And, you know, that really upset me, because horses, after those years, to remember me to come up like that, that's no dummy.
No, that was him giving
Now,
you a
I
hug
think
because he knew you.
this guest of Jack Power, he was comparing pigs. Pigs were smart, but the pigs, what made them smart, they put them just where they had to go through different channels to get to the feed.
They were just hungry.
So that wasn't very smart, they were just hungry.
So, like, what's the what would you say is the difference between Giddy and Perry?
The difference was the mouth. Imperator had what I'd call a perfect mouth. I mean a perfect mouth. You could, and Giddy Up Go was just the opposite. He was so strong. He was so strong that I never did get him where I really wanted him in the mouth. But I did a good job covering it up. But
Yeah, sure.
tell you a little, show you how strong game he was. In my barn in Indiana, the one that the people built for me,
Sure.
it had a closet on the one end, and about 5 feet deep, with a door on one end. And he was so, I was always trying to slow him down. But I'd crack that door about 6 inches, and I'd let him run into that. It wouldn't hurt him because it had the give to it, but it made a lot of noise.
Oh.
But I kind of taught him to back up a little bit that way. But boy, I just don't know how to tell you.
They were just each unique, it
how
sounds
good a
like.
horse he was.
Mhm.
And to compare him, there's people that liked him better than Perry,
Mhm.
but they didn't know about the mouth. But the mouth is what made the difference in the two horses.
Mhm.
And that's the reason I always had enough mouth left to do all that crazy extra passing that I
Right.
did. He'd leave that ring with just as good a mouth as he did when he went in. Now, there's not many horses you can say that about, but that's the kind of mouth he had. And I'm going to make a big statement, if there ever was a perfect saddlebred 5-gated horse, he was the one.
Mhm.
This and the whole works. He just, to me, he's he's the best one that's ever been.
Yeah.
Now, Mitch, he'd probably say Skywatch, and that's fine, because they're just two great horses and two different horses. And I'm going to back up. Old Mitch, he outsmarted me that first time he beat me. He outsmarted me, and he took the shortcut, and I was putting in some miles that,
Yeah.
that he wasn't.
He did his homework.
Huh?
He did his homework before he got there. It
Yeah,
sounds like, and
yeah.
he was ready. Yeah.
So I finally got a chance to. We were back and forth, and the crowd going crazy all the time.
Mhm.
And I forget what year it was. Let's see. Anyway, I finally got to beat Skywatch.
Right.
Now Mitch would use the excuse, and I don't blame him. His horse, he said, and I take his word for it, is something was bothering him.
Mhm.
So he took the gate. So I put on a one-man show.
And I bet everybody, but the crowd went
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah.
I bet so.
But I respect Mitch and I respect Skywatch, and always will.
Sure. Someone said, was prize contender as happy as he looked like he was? He always had such a big, bright, happy eye.
He's the happiest stud horse or stallion I've ever seen. I mean, that horse was happy every day. Never drop an ear. And you can't say that about a lot of studs. A lot of good studs are about half mad all the time. I'm going to use a little example. Everybody get worked up about, the stud class. And they'd hit that ring guy like gangbusters. And by the time they turned around, they just kind of ran out of gas. I hate to say it, but I think that goes with most stallions. Now, Trey Lee's stud,
Sure.
he was a happy stud because Trey made him happy. Trey knows how to let a horse be what it wants to be.
Right.
I have a lot of a lot of good thoughts about Trey Lee and some others. We'll get into that later on.
Well, you can go ahead and talk about him now if you want to.
Okay.
That's fine.
I'm
Go right ahead.
going to say right now that there's the best group of young horsemen coming on than I've ever seen. I mean, I could, I more or less already named one, but I tell you what, old Matt Shiflett, that guy's a showman.
He is.
And he's well, I'm going to back up. Down in Brookshire was kind of in charge of Trey's, not Trey, but
Matt.
huh?
Matt Shipley?
Matt's horses.
Yeah.
And they came to my barn when I was over in Cox's Creek. look, they were looking at horses.
Mm-hmm.
And I told Donnie that day, and I'm gonna ask Matt someday if he remembers it. I said, Donnie, it's just a matter of time before he wins the big one, we call it. That's the big one, everybody knows.
Right, yeah.
It's just a matter of time. So I was happy to see him win that because I'd already said he's going to get there. And it took him a few years, knocking at the door, I call it, and then it was his time. So you're going to be hearing from those two guys for a long time. But there's some more that, like I say, it's the best group of young trainers I've seen come on. And you're going to be hearing from them a long time.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think so. Those are the two you're really
Now,
telling us we need to watch.
They're both showmen.
They are.
Showing a gaited horse, or any horse, it's not just going around and around. It's putting on a show. Putting on a show, and those guys know how to do it. Now, you have to have the horse to do it.
Right.
And I've been fortunate enough to have those kind of horses that I could show off a little bit. Now, that brings up L.S. Dickey thing. I was just a teenager. And he said a show horse is supposed to entertain the public. And that always stuck with me. So if you've got the horse under that you could show off a little bit, you better do it. And
That's what the crowd loves, right?
yeah, and well, that reminds me of a story. What was that guy's name? He had a really good harness mare. He never had one before, and he never was going to have one again. And he wanted, the name will come to me directly, and he wanted me to head the mare. So I headed her to Lexington and Louisville. And they had a timeout, and he pulled in, and he just sat there like this. I said, I can't think of his name, but anyway, I said, you'll never have another one like to go out there and show off. Boy, here you went, the crowd going. So he comes in and lined up and did that again. I said, go back out and entertain some more. Hit a crowd. So that's Bobby Morrison was his name. And he had a great mare that Larry Hodge wound up with and winning the big one. And so that's just a little thing that if you've got a nice horse, now some horse you might have, you're not going to just pull in, not try to show them.
Yeah.
Because
glad you got to the line.
I've seen some guys try it, they make that pass, and they didn't get any crowd with them. But you got the right horse, you better show off, because they don't come along that.
Right.
And then, you know, when you don't have a horse, like, you appreciate them when you have them, but when you don't have them, you realize you didn't appreciate them enough. So that's just a little showmanship thing that these young trainers always remember. Yeah.
Yeah, someone asked, what was your best advice for riding a gaited horse? And so it's back to that whole showmanship is a big part of that, isn't it?
Listen, it's almost half of it. I mean, the horse has to have a little help for sure.
Right.
But I've been on horses that I didn't want to make that little extra pass. I want to get down the corner and hide. But when you got one that's a real show horse, and you get the opportunity to show off, you better do it. Now, the question might not come up,
Okay.
but I'm known for my gaited horses. But I've won the walk trot stake 6 times,
Oh.
and if I hadn't sold Gift of Love, she'd have won it a couple more times for me. She won 4 consecutive years.
Wow.
And then I made a remark to Roz, my wife at the time. I said, if I ever have another one like Gift of Love, I'm going to bring back the top hat. Years ago, the men were showing top hats and dress up. And so I bought me a top hat. And every time I'd put it on and come out and model, my wife and Angie, oh no, we don't want to do that. But see, with those white socks and stuff, it'd been something to show off. But to fill in for that, I got me a white hat to match my white legs.
So they never let you show in that top hat?
No, they said, oh, no. I thought I looked pretty good at it.
I bet you did.
Now, going way back in the county fair days, I was probably overdressed because I saw Art Simmons in those top hats. I was probably overdressed because I was wearing a top hat at those little leaky roof circuit, we called it. But anyway, the top hat days went out. Top hat and white gloves, but those days are gone. But my wife and Angie, they discouraged me every time I put it on.
They just didn't want to let you do it, I guess. Okay. Well, so who do you consider, you've talked about a couple of the young trainers, who do you consider to be some of the best horsemen in your life, of your generation maybe?
Okay, that's I can answer that.
I guess maybe current and of your generation, not necessarily the younger ones. Who do you consider to be some of the best?
Well, I think that's pretty easy because you'd have to put my. She won the gaited stake 7 times. I don't think anybody's ever going to top that. I thought I was going to with Perry, but we sold him and I missed a couple of years. Earl Teeter. Earl Teeter. I put him right in there. Those two are at the top. Tom Moore.
Oh yeah.
Tom was a great horseman. And he should be alive today. He abused himself, a little too much bourbon, and it caught up with him. But because he's a couple of years younger than I am.
Oh.
And but let's put him in there. Lee Roby. Lee Roby. I always admired him. Now talk about showmanship. He was a showman. And I got to put Art Simmons in there. Art Simmons has got a lot to do with where I am today.
Right.
Yeah. And something else that put me where I am today was my first wife, Roz. I hope I'm talking loud enough. And when I married her, I said, now, I've been used to being spoiled, and I don't want to change. So she kept me spoiled. And she did everything, the bookkeeping and I wouldn't be where I am today without her. And then Judy, when I married her, I said, I've been used to being spoiled, and I don't want to change. So she's carried on. She's kept me spoiled. So I was spoiled way back in southern Indiana with my mom. I'm going to tell you how spoiled I was. I had two sisters, one older, one younger than her. I'm the baby, so that's the reason I was spoiled. And I'd wake up in the morning and I'd say, Mom, I just don't feel right. So just stay home, don't worry about it. So then here's some more spoiling. My 17th birthday, I came home from school and Mom said, you better go to the barn, you got a sick horse. So I go to the barn, I open that door, and boy, there was a Town and Country Chrysler convertible. Town and Country, that was back in the real wood, what they call them woodies, real wood. And so my dad, he was in the manning business. He sent one of his coal miners all the way to Detroit to drive that thing right off the line to me.
Wow.
So it'd be for my birthday. So here I am, 17 years old, with, they call it a Hollywood.
It's a pretty fancy car. Yeah.
I always said Clark Gable had the first one. I had the second one. Mine was blue and his was maroon. But it was a movie star car. I mean, the hood was as long as from here to here, and no power steering back in those days. So
it was tough.
So I drove that for 4 years and traded it on a Cadillac, a baby blue Cadillac. And I always wish I'd have kept it because I was at a auto show in Florida and they had 2 or 3 of them. I said, what are these things worth nowadays? At that time it was $500,000, so they'll do tell what it is now. So I always kind of wish I'd have kept it after that. But that's just a little bit of the spoiling. And I had the best of clothes, the best of everything, the best bicycle when I was in the bicycle days. So I tell my wives that I give them a warning, I've been spoiled, and I want to stay spoiled. So they did a good job.
Oh, I think that's wonderful.
Roz she was an earth angel, and that's an earth angel sitting in there. They've been good, so that'd be part of it. We're not into that yet, but that'd be part of my advice to young trainers, is to get the right woman.
Or
get the right woman.
Or if you've got a female trainer, we've got a lot of those.
Do what?
We've got a lot of those female trainers too. They got to get the right husband. They need a partner to help them do this business.
Same thing.
Right.
Get the right man. There's a lot of good men out there, and there's a lot of good women, but you just got to be smart enough to get the right one.
So do you have any female trainers that you think are exceptional?
Oh yeah.
Past or now?
Huh?
Either past or now.
Well,
Because there are a lot of wonderful female trainers.
I'm going to go back to the past a little way.
Okay.
And nobody would recognize the name except Melinda and Melissa. Because her mother was a good friend of Jane Fahey. Jane Fahey. She was outstanding in her day, and probably would be today. But boy, you've got a half a dozen or more that female trainers that are just really, really good. Oh, something popped in my mind. Is Giddy-up ghost story.
Okay.
At Rock Creek one year they had a UPHA meeting. The little building was full of trainers, but they had a panel they had a panel of me, Garland Bradshaw, Donna Moore, Ray Pittman, and Lee Shipman. And one of the questions was, they asked Eddie Guthridge, he's an old timer, he'd seen most all of the stakes of Louisville. He said, who's the best five-gated horse you've ever seen show at Louisville? He said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll tell you the best one that didn't win it was Giddy Up Go.
Oh,
So that was a pretty slick answer.
it was, yeah, absolutely.
And he'd come by and he was a good friend, and he'd come by and watch me work that horse. He's crazy about him, and help me with him. When you get to where you're smart enough that you don't think you need some help, well, you better hang it up.
Yeah.
But I've had Owen Haley. He's going back. He was a great horseman. He brought out Plainview's Julia, best 3-year-old gaited horse I've ever seen at that time, and maybe still is. And so he got to be a good friend of mine, and he just kind of took me in like a son, just kind of like L.S. Dickey did. He'd stop by the barn and stuff. And but I'm going to back up a little bit again. He was a young guy, a second trainer at the famous farm in Lexington.
Are you talking about Spindletop?
Huh?
Are you talking
Spindletop.
about Spindletop, yes,
Spindletop.
absolutely, yes, Yahtzee.
He was assistant trainer,
Pansy Young.
Spindletop. And the lady that owned the place, she was crazy about Owen. And about ready to move him up to the head trainer. And he and the head trainer went on a horse hunting trip and had a wreck.
Oh,
And it scarred Owen Haley. He was a handsome man. Even with the scars, he still was. But the smart lawyers got a hold of him to sue Mrs. Yount.
oh,
If he'd stayed there, she'd have given him anything and everything he wanted. But the lawyers messed it up. He wound up with nothing.
oh,
But he was a good horseman. And the night that he was going to go into the Hall of Fame at Louisville, he died. He died right up in the stands.
oh, how
I mean,
sad.
that's how many times would that happen? So,
Goodness.
but he was a good horseman. Now, what we got?
Which horse was the most difficult to train, but ended up exceeding your expectations?
Okay, that's easy. Giddy Up Go, because he was so strong and overambitious. It took me a while to get him where I could rate him.
Right,
I
right.
told you the little story about the door, and on the end that helped me. And I tell you something about him. There's nobody gonna beat him at Lexington. I mean, he just owned the place. Now one year, there was a mare came out of Missouri, Sonny Sutton brought her in, Kay Sarah. Boy, she was outstanding. And everybody said, well, Giddy Up's time is wound down. And it wasn't wound down, because when the time came, he walked past that mare, and I've got a picture. Someday I'm going to make a museum out of my garage. I've got a picture of the very pass that beat that mare. And I noticed in the mare class, in fact, I tried to buy her after the mare class. And in the mare class, I noticed that she didn't like for a horse to be up the side of her. She put those ears
Put
back.
the ears down.
So I noticed that. So when the time came, on a reverse, oh, it was just perfect. The timing was perfect to take that mare. And when I took her, her ears went back and the show was over.
Oh my.
And I've got a picture of that very shot that I went by. It was taken by a newspaper photographer, which, you know, you don't expect too much.
Right.
But they weren't up there, and it's the darndest picture.
People want to know, where did you get the hats? Is the company still in business? What is your favorite, best place to buy a hat? Where do you buy hats today?
Okay.
Everybody wants to know about the hat.
Well, I'm definitely known as a hat man.
Yeah, you are indeed.
And the sunglass man.
And sunglasses, but everybody loves that hat.
Yeah. Well, the hat deal started in New York in like 1980, 81 or 82. I needed a hat, and I went to Saks Fifth Avenue and bought a camel color hat. And all I did was turn the brim down.
Right.
So that's my style. Turn the brim down. And so the first one was at Macy's, not Macy's,
Saks.
Saks. And then from there on, I had a hat maker in, by the way, the hat I'm talking about is in a museum. You've seen that.
We have it.
I had a hat maker from Cincinnati, Bat Sacks is a funny name, but that was the hat store. And he made me the hat that's just behind me on Imperator. See the hat?
In this
Yeah.
photo?
Yeah, on it, yeah. He duplicated the New York hat and did a heck of a job. So since then, I bought hats at his hat shop. I'm getting ready to have one more made. I'd like to have one more. Just change it just a little bit, make the brim a little bit wider. And I called the other day to see if he was still in the business, because he was getting old. So, oh yeah. So I'm gonna make a trip to Cincinnati and buy one more handmade hat.
That sounds
But that's
wonderful.
where the hat started, and the Bat Sacks guy, oh, he did a heck of a job duplicating it.
Yeah.
And then I had two ladies moved in from California, hat makers, and I had a really nice straw hat made for the summer. And boy, they did a good job. But they went back to California. I don't know.
Well, that wasn't very helpful.
No, I think they didn't play the horse shows enough. They should have, because I've got a small head, and my size is not easy to find. And I don't know where in the world they get these hats for these little kids.
For the young ones.
But if she'd have got in on that, I think she'd have really done well. Because I see some of the kids wearing them, you can tell they're a little bit too big. But I like, I bought some, I've got what I call my gangster hat that I bought from the Bat Sacks. It's made in Italy, and it's like you see in all these gangster movies. And I might put it on before you leave.
I think that'd be fabulous. That would be great. That would be great.
But it's really a comfortable hat. It just fits just right. There's a lot, you can have a size 6 7/8. You'd think you'd go in a hat shop and put it on and feel it. but they just don't all feel the same. There's a difference.
There would be.
And I just like the way they feel.
That makes perfect sense. Well,
But you'd put that on your bat sacks in Cincinnati.
Cincinnati.
They've got about any kind of hat you want and can make any kind of hat you want.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it'd be good for these young riders to,
Have a quality hat
yeah.
that fits.
So
That would be nice.
that's that story.
Okay, that's a good story. There were a lot of questions about your hats.
Let's go back on the hat again.
Okay, good.
I was at Madison Square Garden, and Imperator had won his 6th or 7th championship.
Mm-hmm.
I liked that show. And one of the ushers came back and said, Muhammad Ali'd like to come back and meet you and your horse. I said, we'll bring him on.
Sure.
So he got back there and he put on a show. And the horse nipped at him a little bit.
Yeah.
And I had a picture where he had his picture, and somebody stole it off my wall.
Oh no.
Yeah, but I've got I've got another one over there,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a little inscription on it.
Uh-huh.
That's world's greatest man with world's greatest horse.
Oh, that's nice.
You got it written on there.
Oh, that is
But
very nice. I see it.
that's how many people have Muhammad Ali come back and want to meet you. It's usually the other way around.
Right. I was going to say not
Everybody
many. I'm
chasing
sure. Yeah.
But that made me feel good that Muhammad was chasing me.
I think that's wonderful. I think
And
that's wonderful.
he said, I like that horse, and I sure do like that hat. So the hat thing is just...
The hat thing
just
is
been-
special.
I'll never forget that. He said, and then, he's this dementia, or what you want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
was coming on where you didn't think he was maybe just right.
Mm-hmm.
And that was 4 or 5 years after that,
Mm-hmm.
that Stan bumped into him at the airport
Mm-hmm.
and introduced himself and said, my dad had a horse in New York that you came back to see.
Mm-hmm.
Now this, that Imperator is not just really easy. Imperator, he said.
Oh.
So it
how
just
about
shows
that?
you, he had more up here than we thought. Because
Yeah.
that was 4 or 5 years after that.
Mm-hmm.
And there'd be a lot of horse people who wouldn't remember that name.
Yeah. It made an impression on him when he had the horse.
You know,
That's great.
That comes up with another story. The Meaners, I forget what his name was, but they didn't like it, and they wanted to change his name. So they came up with the Imperator. And I didn't really like it. I said, they'll be calling him Imperator, which they do so. And Judge Meaner said, they'll learn to get it right. So it's kind of an unusual name, but it's got a story behind it. Some old famous warrior or something. I don't remember what it was. But speaking of the Meaners, they were good owners. They had never had anything but really nice horses. But they were a little tough. I mean, one year at Lowell, Giddy Up Go was sitting there ready to go. I mean, he was tuned and ready. And the Judge Maynard said, now, I had Magic Marble for them. The horse that I told you was really a nice horse, but not quite. And Maynard's had about 10 or 12 horses in training. And the judge said, well, if you don't show Magic Marble, we'll just pull all of our horses. And that was a lot of income, you see.
Yeah,
But
sure.
you know what? Looking back on it, I wouldn't have given in to it. I might have lost some horses, and I might have lost them. But Gideon Go, that was his year. That was his
So
year.
you showed the other horse instead?
Huh?
You showed the other marble horse
Yeah, I showed
instead?
him. And he was a nice one. I think he was third. And, but boy, if I had to do over, I never would have given in to that pressure.
Right.
But they were pressure people. They pressure people.
Yeah.
But good, they were good for me. Now I'm going to tell you a story that not too many people know.
Okay.
It was an unusual thing that happened. I'd found a horse that my customers usually do about anything I wanted. But this one time it didn't work. And I had Protege, but I'd found a horse that I thought, I told everybody, trotted like Skywatch and slow-gaited like Imperator. And that's a big statement.
Yeah.
So I told J.K. McDonald that owned what I was going to do. And like I say, I was used to having people do what I want. But he didn't think much of it. I thought Protege could wait another year, just fine. So they sent a van to pick Protege up, and he was on his way to Calorama for him. Halfway there. And I called J.K. and said, this horse that I liked, he's turned out to be a complete idiot.
Oh no.
And I said, is there any way you'd change your mind? So the horse came back. So that just, that's an unusual thing to happen. But there's another one I'll tell you about. We got Louisville, and the horse that I thought a lot of. I had the fella that we bought him from come show me. And I wound up winning the class with Protege, and that horse was like fifth or sixth or something. So I made the right move that time. And, but I'll get around to another story here directly. Protege, like I say, he wanted that horse that I thought was better than him. Wound up not doing too well. Now there's another story that didn't quite work out in my favor. We sold a horse to the people that Shively's had, and let me think how that goes. Oh, I had a horse at Rock Creek working him. I had him on consignment. Some people from the Carolinas sent him in, and I'm trying to speak up a little bit because I'm afraid I'm not coming through.
I think you're good.
Okay. And Raymond said, oh my gosh, he said, they flew in a helicopter, sat right down in my front yard. That's when I was over where wheels are now. And they bought him for a lot of money. He was, at that at that time, maybe a record, a lot of money. And Raymond said, well now, they'd like to leave that horse with you. And I said, well, that's fine. And I said, I really like him. So that was fine. I went right along with it. And then a few years after that, the fellow that bought him, what the heck? The Chancellors.
That's who I was gonna guess,
The
but I didn't wanna be
Chancellors.
wrong.
The Chancellors.
Uh-huh.
Now, I never have told Raymond this story, but Raymond told me they want to leave him with you. That was fine. And then a couple of weeks, Raymond called. He said, you know, the Chancellors like to get that horse, like to get him home where he could see him. I said, well, that's fine. Anytime you want to get him. So, several years after that, Chancellor said, I don't know how we happened to be together, but he talked. He said, you know, I wanted to leave that horse with you, but Raymond wanted to get him home.
Oh.
So there's a little difference in the story, and you can believe who you want to believe.
A little rivalry.
But that's, that Raymond said, well, okay, that finishes that story. And then this young horse that I brought out, he went at Horse Park. He was second at Rock Creek with sand. He'd put some new sand, a little too much for him to handle. But boy, what a nice horse. And Raymond bought that horse for, he belonged to, I had him for the Nallies. And Raymond, I don't remember who he bought him for. But Nallies, I was going to put their horse on the back burner, and didn't work this time either. So they sent him to Chavlish, and he went. The horse called 5 o'clock. I've got a picture of him in there before he was ever shown. It's just outstanding. So I called. Mrs. Nally was willing to bring him back home.
Oh, good.
And I said, Raymond, Mrs. Nally, she'd kind of like to bring that horse back home. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, the deal's a deal, and we're sticking with the deal.
Oh my.
So that's how close I came to getting him back.
Oh.
But he was, he reminded you more of Imperator than Protege even. He was just an outstanding conformation, long neck. And when I brought him out at the Horse Park, everybody's trying to buy him. And I didn't take him to the Royal, and everybody said, well, how come you didn't bring him to the Royal? I said, well, I just want to wait till next year to make the big splash. And Larry Hodge, he was one of the first ones too. So that's that story. That's the 5 o'clock story. But I'll tell you something that always made me feel a little bad. That horse he was what I call a finished horse. He had everything ready to go except a little change in his shoeing. And I told Todd, I said, we're getting ready to change that horse's shoe, and told him what we're going to do, and everything about him. And some trainers won't do that. They'll kind of, they don't want to do
Right.
anything. But I did. I told him everything about that horse. And then it comes out in the magazine where I might step on some toes here, but it came out in the magazine what all they'd done to him, what they'd done. He didn't have anything to do except shoe him just a little bit different. And the girl that taking care of him, like he was the only, she was the only girl in the world, and how great he looked. And I had a good trainer, caretaker taking care of him.
Right.
I mean, he was top shape.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to use the boy, and isn't that crazy, over in one of the top young trainers, blonde-headed guy over in Virginia.
Smith Lilly?
Huh?
Are you talking about Smith Lilly?
Who?
Smith Lilly?
Smith Lilly. By the way, he's up here on my list.
He's a class act, for sure, yes.
Not only as a horseman, but a gentleman.
I agree
As a
completely.
gentleman. And the book he wrote on training
Mm-hmm.
is the best book that's ever been written on training.
Mm-hmm. We have it at the museum.
Smith Lilly is right up here with me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what I was on a story.
You were gonna tell us a story about him, I think.
Huh?
You were gonna tell us a story about Smith.
Oh, I always thought when Smith Lilly showed the horse that George Knight had made, George had won
Mm-hmm.
young horse classes
Mm-hmm.
and put it together real good. So Smith Lilly, in his victory speech, I guess you'd call it,
Uh-huh.
he said, I just want to say and thank George Knight for what a good job he'd done with this horse.
That was very nice.
He said, I didn't have much to do. I just gave George Knight the credit.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it would have been a good opportunity for Todd to say the same thing.
Right.
I've never told anybody this, but it bothered me and still bothers me.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I mean, he hadn't had the horse for 2 or 3 weeks. What are you going to do with the horse changing him in that time? But Todd, I like him. I've known him since he's just a kid. He saw him gain his horse at Rock Creek and had a great big straw hat on. It was too big for him. But anyway, I remember him as a kid, and he's turned out to be, one of the top horsemen, no doubt. But I'll have to, I think maybe he ought to know this, because it bothers me still.
Mm-hmm. He probably knows.
Huh?
He probably knows.
Yeah, well, Smith Lilly, I just always thought that was nice for him to do.
It was, yes.
And here, they hadn't had him but 2 weeks, or maybe 3 at the most.
Mm-hmm.
And here he wins at Louisville. And I thought that was a good name, 5 o'clock.
Oh, it is.
The Nallys.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, the Nallys were really good customers for me. I've got a picture of me and her taken at Lexington, and I believe, boy, we both look good.
So I guess there's always with trainers. I mean, especially I think in Kentucky, because we're so concentrated with Saddlebreds.
Yeah.
There's a I'm not sure what to call it. I mean, there's a competition for certain, but there's also a sense of camaraderie and family. So is that sometimes hard to balance?
Yeah.
I would think.
Yeah, I think it.
I think that's what you just told us.
I think the trainers over this way are a little more peace, you may say, than the Lexington bunch. I think they fuss a little bit more than we do about one another.
So one of the questions I wanted to come back to, because you made an impression on me when you started that story. When you're a trainer, okay, particularly a young trainer starting out, where your customers are, I mean, they're always important to you, but when you're young and you're starting out, they're really important to you because you rely on that cash flow income. And how do you draw the line between you're the trainer, you're the expert, you're the one in charge, it's your barn, but these customers, you know, they on some level, you know, they are your customers. You've got to make them happy, keep them happy, do what their horses need, and sometimes they probably don't agree with what you think is the best decision. So how do young trainers learn how to balance that? How to keep their customers happy and build their business, but not make decisions that they don't really want to make. I mean, you know, not sacrifice what they think is best or right just to make someone happy that might not really understand the decision.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Well, that old saying, you gotta roll with the punches.
Okay.
You know, you gotta roll with the punches. You get some stuff that you don't really like or agree with, but you just kind of roll with the punches. But I've had, my customers have always relied on me for the decisions. But a couple of times it backfired. One time it paid off, and the other time it didn't. But is that kind of what you're talking about?
I think so. I mean, just sort of, I guess your advice, because you can look back and see what you might have done that was the right thing, or what you might wish you had done differently with that kind of relationship, and that your experiences can help someone else that's still having to juggle all that. So what you're telling them is to roll with the punches and don't get too upset.
Yeah, you have to kind of absorb what you want, and the rest of it just kind of. Now, Judge Miner, he was, well, they had a lot of suggestions. And Judge Miner, he knew the breeding better than anybody I've ever known, pedigrees. He could go way back. And I used to be pretty good, but I've lost out on the modern day stud, but I've got some ideas about it. We'll get into that later on. I wanted to tell you about a mistake that I made, you know. George Schmid, you know George?
I do, yeah.
Nice young guy, worked with me for a good while. And he still calls me for advice and stuff. But he was over leasing some stalls over from Joe Cornell when she was over there. And George called me and said, "Boy, I've got a stud here. Belongs to people up in Pennsylvania." He said, "You need to see him." And I went to see him, and I mean, he was everything George said. So I called Kay Durnell. You know Kay?
I do, yes.
She's a good friend. I said, "Kay, there's a stud over at George's that I'd like for you to look at." And she bought him in a minute. Anybody would. And I'm looking for you. I'm looking for you, who it turned out to be. So my game plan was I was getting to the age where I didn't really want to show a stallion. Some stallions are not too good to show. Prize Contender was an exception. But I said, I'd like to gild him and let him wind up my career. I think he'd be a good way to wind up. So she temporarily accepted that, And then she got to thinking about his bloodlines and didn't want to do it. And I didn't want to handle a stud, you know, breeding wise. But that's a big mistake. I should have, well, I'm gonna back up. George, after they bought him, he'd been cooped up in the barn all winter, never outside. And I rode him in the barn and I thought, boy, this is something. Went outside, first time he'd been out, that long straightaway, boy, he got down there on the end of that lane. There's a big pine tree. He wrapped me around that.
Uh-oh.
He went right in the middle of that pine tree and wrapped himself around it. And I didn't fall off, but I stepped off. I was glad to get off. So, if we hadn't taken him out that side that quick, I wish I'd have brought him home to my barn. Just taking my time and because there really wasn't anything that bad about him, but I just had something about a stud in my mind. But I don't have any doubt about him winning at Louisville. George showed him won the, I think he was either won the stud class or second, one or the other. I think maybe second. And he went to, well, we'll just cut it off there. I made a mistake in not saying Kay. I believe I ought to bring him over and get the feel of him, and then we'll make a decision maybe where he should go.
Yeah.
But boy, I can picture myself on him. I ran across a picture of him today in a magazine. He's something. And we're probably going to get into the breeding directly. Well, let's go. In my day, it was main event over at Happy Valley Farm. Not the one in Georgia, but the one over. It was main event, and let's just stop there. Main event was really good to me. And Mr. I think Mr. Gamble. By the way, he's part of the Procter and Gamble family.
Ah.
Yeah, he was part of that family. Had a nice farm over in Danville. And I'd go over there. I'd go at tax time. Tax time. I knew that would be a good time. And we'd look at some horses, and they'd price them individually. And then we'd go in the office, and I said, "Now let's break that down into a package." So, make a long story short, I'd go to Happy Valley Farm. They had a nice van to deliver them. I'd buy a van load of horses and deliver it over here.
Wow.
And most of them were main event. And I really liked him. So now the modern day is, you know, Nutcracker, you gotta say
Sure.
I mean, he's up here on another level.
Right.
So, I'm trying to think of, you know, I'm not into it like I used to, but
Right,
Nutcracker is pretty, you don't have to be very smart to put him up in another category. Oh, if I was gonna recommend somebody to breed a horse, it would be the horse we were just talking about. Kay's horse.
Looking for you.
I'd recommend him, and if I had some brood mares, that's where I'd go. Because I mean, he's proven himself so fast.
Uh-huh,
He
that's
had
great.
2 major winners,
Mhm.
Louisville gated, you know,
Mhm.
the big one,
Mhm.
and then the mare class.
Mhm.
And he's got some straws left. But boy, I think somebody'd be smart and using up some of those straws.
Mhm.
And then Lionel's horse,
Mark of Charm.
Mark of Charm, he's up on my list, way up, because he's come on so fast. So let's just leave it there. That's my two favorites. And but there's some really nice young studs coming on. Yeah, I'm trying to think of the one that's. Anyway, we won't get into that because I can't remember some of them. I got them in my head, but I can't get them out.
All right, fair enough.
But
We put you on the spot. We
that's-
didn't give you
That's
any
2
warning.
horses
That are
I'm
nice.
real high on. Yeah.
All right, so what are your 2 favorite horse shows? The first one being one that we don't have anymore. I know a lot of people who loved Madison Square Garden. I
Yeah.
did not ever get to go there, but I've heard so many amazing stories. But
Yeah.
you know, like think of a show that we don't have anymore that is historic, I guess. And then, you know, today, what's the horse show this summer you want to most go to?
Well, you know, there's nothing like saying that you won the big one at Louisville.
Right?
So you gotta put Louisville on the top.
It's on the top today and history.
Yes.
Yeah. It's the big
Yes.
deal.
Now, it's gonna take Louisville a while to, see, I got to give Charlotte, the manager,
Yes, Charlotte Matson.
put that on
Right.
the way she did. But it's gonna get better when she can, you know, get back in the groove.
When we can get back to normal and everybody's vaccinated and the virus is not scaring
Yeah,
us, then
Yeah.
yes,
But
absolutely.
Louisville, you gotta put up there. In Madison Square Garden, when I was a kid, you hear anything about Madison Square Garden, the big fight and stuff,
Yeah.
you know, I remember that as a kid. So then I go up there and start showing there. And I think we hold the record as, I think maybe 13, 14 championships gated. And so that's up on, but what helps that list is the shopping.
Oh, of course.
I'd come home with, I like to shop. Now Roz, she didn't really particularly like to, I tried to get her to do it a little bit, but she'd sit there and watch me spend thousands of dollars. And it made her happy. They're being spoiled again, you see.
Right, exactly.
So between the show and the shopping, it's way up on the list. But Lexington, my gosh, you gotta have Lexington and Rock Creek. I kind of bunch those 2 together, Rock
Right.
Creek and Lexington.
Yeah, Rock Creek is sort of a small Lexington. It's got that
Yeah.
feel. It's got that feel.
Yeah.
What do you think about Lexington being at the horse park now? How different it feels.
Well,
I think there's good and
yeah,
not as
yeah,
good.
it's gonna
We
take,
lose the history of the
it's
Red
gonna
Mile.
take people a while to get used to it. But I'm glad I got my days in at the old Red Mile. And then-
I miss the Red Mile too, but I think in the long run,
Yeah,
the horse park is a good choice.
yeah, it's, you'd have to say an improvement, but still the Red Mile sticks in your mind.
Oh, yeah.
Especially when, I hate to sit here and brag on myself, but when that gated stake 13 times,
Wow.
you know, that's something, gives these young people something to shoot for. But I like that show. But the horse park, it'll eventually catch on.
It'll get there, I think.
But I believe it's about 50-50. People like it and don't like it.
You told me earlier you had what is the biggest question that you always get asked?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I know exactly. I told you that just a while ago.
Yep.
The question I have asked the most
Uh-huh.
is how do you set a horse's head with the curb, tip him over, and raise him up both on the curb? Because we all know that snaffle's on there to raise him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a question I have asked, because I did that. That's
Sure.
the way I do. In fact, there at Louisville on the Victor Pass, I'd throw the snaffle away and just right at on that curb and sit right here. But I can't answer it. I can do it. I can do it. That's what I tell anybody.
Mm-hmm.
I can do it, but I can't tell you how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Now I can feel a horse's tongue with my fingers,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know. You know, some of my assistant trainers they'd want to, but I couldn't teach them to do it. They just to feel that. But you know, we all know the snaffle, the raise, the
Sure.
curve, the tip.
Mm-hmm.
But I can do both with the curve, but I don't know how to tell you.
It's just not something you can teach someone. They have to just
Huh?
experiment. They just have to experiment until they can figure out how to do it.
Yeah, and you know what? The nearest one to it, I think, is Rob Tanner.
Mm-hmm.
He was a curve bit man. And then Tom he was really good with the curve. So those two guys, they were getting close to it, but not quite.
That's very interesting. I think there are a lot of things that are that way.
Yeah.
Either it comes naturally for you or it doesn't.
Yeah,
You
and,
just can't teach
if
certain
you ever
things.
notice, I hold my reins different than
Mm-hmm.
most people. I hold a snaffle on these two. I don't cross them, in other words.
Mm-hmm.
And me, Art Simmons, and Marty Mueller, the only three trainers I know of that do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now Marty came up kind of in the same school I did. He worked for L.S. Dickey. I was just a kid, and I got to see Marty train horses, and I watched him. And but he's a darn good horseman. It's pretty hard for me to keep him out of that list.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one that came up with Marty, Elvis Wilson. Nobody ever heard of him. He was content staying out there in the country.
Uh-huh.
But I tell you what, he was a good horseman. And then one better than him that fits right in that group that's hard for me to keep is Bill Hill. Now you could have a group of horsemen at the Horse Park Museum, and nobody had ever heard of Bill Hill, but boy, he could do more with one hand than most people with two. Now he came up under L.S. Dickey,
Uh-huh.
and Marty did, and this Elvis did, and so I learned a lot up at French Lake by just watching.
Mm-hmm.
But and still, with Dickie, before I was old enough to drive, my dad would drop me off at French Lick at State Fair time. And I'd ride over with Bob, that was his son, and L.S. to the Kentucky State Fair.
Mm-hmm.
This started way back in the old fairgrounds,
Uh-huh.
which would seat 5,000 or 6,000 people, but crammed in there.
Right.
That's the old fairgrounds.
Mm-hmm.
I never did show there, but I'd go to the shows with them. Now, that reminded me of another Dickie story. His son, Bob, could have been, he could have been a top horseman, but he just didn't have the ambition to be one. So he kind of took the back seat to Marty and some of them. But he was, we'd get in the back of that. It's an old LaSalle, that most people wouldn't, but it was like a second cousin to the Cadillac, great big old thing. And L.S. Dickey and I'd be in the back seat, Bob do the driving. And he'd be just driving along, he'd be trying to explain something to me about a curb bit, maybe.
Right.
And when he leaned over here a minute, when he was talking to me, and let me hit him with the elbow. He'd grab me by the elbow like that, as he was telling me. He was keeping my attention.
So
I'm pinching pretty hard, but he did too.
He pinched you to keep you listening.
But those Dickey days were, I wouldn't give anything for them. And then we graduated to the Simmons days.
Right.
And then it got to where we'd buy a nice horse about anywhere we'd find it. Now I've had a lot of luck in finding diamonds in the rough, I call it. I bought 2 horses out of a pig pen.
Oh my.
Out of a pig pen. One of them went ahead and made a world champion. And the other one, the pig had bitten a chunk out of its ear, the tip of its ear. So when I'd trim her, I'd always leave that hair in to fill in. But that was a mare called Moonlight Bay. That was way back. I was just a kid almost when I had it. And so we go to Youngstown, Ohio. It was really a good show back then. And we ran into a mare called Technostar that had sold for a lot of money and a big reputation. So we pull in there. I took 6 horses. They were all free-eating horses to Youngstown. And we won all the walk trot classes. But this little Moonlight Bay mare, she had to go against Technostar and beat her. Beat Technostar.
Oh, wow.
Well, that was big news. Beat Technostar because she'd sold for a lot of money and a lot of promotion. Yeah. So that's a curb bit thing.
Got it.
I can do it, but I don't know how to tell it. But Tom and Rob Byers are the closest to it. Doing it.
To be able to do to duplicate what you were doing. That was interesting. So are there other Dickey stories that you want to share? You spent a lot of time there.
Yeah,
That was a special, I would say that was a special time in your life, was it not?
What?
When you were with Dickey at that
Oh,
farm?
yeah. Those years, and then graduated in the Simmons days, those were good days, and I learned a lot. Oh, I'll tell you a funny story about Art Simmons. He was a top trainer, one of the top trainers. And we go over there, I go over with Mr. Grigsby. He was an owner of mine. And we looked at a horse, and Art was, he's riding it good. But Mr. Grigsby pulled him in. He said, "Now, get off of that horse and let Don show you how to slow gait a horse." So it took a lot of nerve for somebody to say that.
Right,
Art
yeah,
he was way up on the top. And that brings up another story. This was a big boost to my career. We had a mare called Really Mine, Wing Commander mare. And we go to Little Rock. Little Rock was a good show back at that time. And Art Simmons had won the gaited stake there like 17 years in a row. So we come in with Really Mine, we won the mare class and he won the gelding class, and came back and I beat Art Simmons. Now that was a feather in my cap to
That
do,
was a big deal,
do
yeah.
that as a young guy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's, or, they had, Liberace is an entertainer at that show.
Uh-huh.
And the Little Rock, that wasn't the right place for him. He just didn't go over it all. I think some of them walked out. But they had Liberace.
Mm-hmm.
And those Illinois shows, I'm jumping around a little bit,
That's okay.
but those Southern Illinois shows, like I told you, about 20 miles apart,
Mm-hmm.
I'd go on that circuit when school was out, and I wouldn't come home till school started.
Wow.
Just boom, boom, boom. And I told you the story about the dollar bill over on that circuit, but I had a story in my mind I wanted to tell you.
Okay.
Let's go to something else and then maybe come back to me.
All right, well, you just jump in anytime,
Okay,
because we love hearing everything you have to say.
okay.
But we've been talking a lot about history, and I know that there are two sweet girls that are just the apple of your eye.
Oh,
So
yeah.
tell me about your granddaughters and their riding, and we want to take a picture of the socks.
Okay.
We gotta see the socks. We wanna hear that story.
Yeah, I've got a whole box full of them. And
Yeah, we wanna see the socks. We wanna hear about the
yeah, well,
girls.
those granddaughters and my daughter and son-in-law, I call them an all-American family.
They certainly
That's
have
an
that look.
all-American
Yeah,
family.
yeah.
And I just found out today, Angie called me that Ella has a new horse. Did I tell you that?
Well, I knew because I talked to Angela, but it was a surprise today, I think.
Yeah, a surprise. And they sent a picture on my phone.
Mhm.
And so tomorrow, if I feel like it, and I think I will, I'll go over and watch them ride. They both have a lot of natural talent, I think. And all they need to be lucky enough to stumble on the right horse. That juvenile division is tough,
It is.
but they've got the ability. With the right horse, they're going to be all right. Yeah.
So do you go see them
Huh?
ride? Do you go to see them ride a lot?
Yeah, I was there last Saturday. I didn't think I felt like it, but getting in that barn kind of perked me up.
I think going to the barn is therapeutic for anyone that's a horse person.
Yeah, it perked me up.
I can totally understand that.
Yeah.
I think that's,
Now Angie, let me tell you something about her. She was a good young rider, but she was so tiny it scared me to death. I couldn't hardly watch. I didn't
Oh.
watch sometime. And so we turned her over. She rode some with Marilyn. And there's a mistake. I should have bought it. Marilyn had a little short neck mare that would have been perfect. It had taken Angie right to the top. But I wanted one of these long neck things.
right.
And I can't think of them, but it went ahead and won I don't know how many times ago. So that was a mistake not getting that. But she had a walk truck pony called Hollywood Smile that was a nice pony that I had bought and made up for her. And she won at Rock Creek. And at Lexington, you know how all the trainer make that last pass.
Sure.
Well, this walk trot pony class is one of these Sam Brennan's rider. He was going to be a trainer and make that pass. It went right underneath that pony and hit it so hard it bent the bit. and pony flipped over.
Oh my.
So that kind of was a little scare for her.
Yeah.
But Tom Moore gave her her first blue ribbon in
Aw.
10 and under at Rock Creek. But she was, it's so tiny it scared me to
Yeah.
death. And she'd come around the turn, and I'd say, slow down, slow down. And Helen on the other, go on, go on. So I wasn't a very good horse show dad.
It's tougher to train your own.
But she, I think I heard through the grapevine that she got on a horse up at Joe Carnell's the other day.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be nice if she kind of get back in it a little bit. But she enjoys it. She enjoys those girls. And we took that pony to Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
And it's close, that Tampa show was close to the airport. And she'd ride out there, those planes flying over. I was a nervous wreck. But she won her first class, and something didn't go quite right in the second class. But we get to Louisville, and she lost her nerve a little bit about showing that pony in Louisville. So I got Ruth Ann Lewis. She was a really good rider, to ride her. And she won both of her classes. She's a world champion pony at the. So if Angie would have been just a little bit farther along, she could have done the same thing. But Ruth Ann, in fact, Ruth Ann, she's written a book. It's really a good book.
Mm-hmm.
And have you seen it or heard about it?
I'm pretty sure, yes.
Oh, it's a good book.
Mm-hmm.
And she mentions that pony and stuff.
Oh,
So,
that's good.
oh, that used to be such a nice show.
Mm-hmm.
It was a good show.
Is that the Gasparilla show?
Huh?
Is it Gasparilla now?
Yeah,
They call it
yes,
Gasparilla
Gasparilla.
now? Mm-hmm.
But the facility at the old Tampa Yacht Club would remind you a lot of Rock Creek.
Oh.
This is charm of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And see that picture right back there, sitting on the rail?
Yes.
Sergeant, you know Sergeant, Leon Sergeant,
Yes.
he took that picture at Tampa
Uh-huh.
and he put it out on the veranda at the clubhouse.
Right.
He put on there, wanted for murder. Wanted for murder. Sarge he was a good friend
Mm-hmm.
and a top photographer.
We
He
have a
was-
lot of his photos.
He
in
was the
museum.
granddaddy of it all.
Mhm.
But see, he was back in the one-shot days.
Right.
Now, there's a big difference. These digital things, I think I could take a picture of that.
It's a different world, really.
Hey, listen, it's made these photographers look good.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Because they can't hardly miss.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some outstanding pictures of the best Saddlebred pictures I've ever seen.
There are some really good ones for
Ooh,
sure.
boy,
Yeah.
no telling what they could have done with this horseback here.
Oh, I know.
That's good enough.
Exactly.
There's Jamie Donaldson.
Mm-hmm.
He was a good. I've got a lot of Jamie Donaldson pictures.
Yes.
I was taken at.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a whole wall over there of Jamie Donaldson, and I've got the best picture of prize contender. It's my favorite picture, taken in New York
Mm-hmm.
by. Who's a photographer that works with who the two photographers to Louisville this year?
I'm guessing Shiflett.
Shiflett
Uh-huh.
and
Howie shots.
Howie.
Yeah.
Howie's dad took this picture.
Oh, how
And I'll
nice.
tell you what, it might be the best Saddlebred picture.
Isn't that something?
And that was at one click days.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Howie had some good training,
I would say he did.
and Doug had some good training. He worked with Sarge.
Right, right.
So that's two young photographers that I mean, they're really, 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 really good.
They are really good.
But this digital is helping make them look better.
makes them look better, makes the horses look better
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
exactly. Well, so, tell us, is there anything that you want to talk about that we might have missed?
Well, I might think of something. I mean, I've had so much.
You've had a long,
I'm gonna-
amazing life.
I'm hoping that camera works because
It does.
I'm going to tell a story that's hard to believe.
Okay.
I was about 16 years old, and we go to Hopkinsville, Kentucky.
Mm-hmm. I've heard of it.
That was a good show.
Mhm.
All those little shows have died, you see.
Mm-hmm.
But Dick Duncan was a big time trainer. I mean, he'd been around and had all kinds of champions. So we go to Hopkinsville, and I had that mare called Rumpy Scott Machine that I told you we bought from Charlie and Helen.
Right.
Beautiful mare. And we have this class. We line up, and the judge walks the line up, and he walks over to the announcer, and he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, this judge cannot make up his mind between those two mares, my mare and Dick Duncan."
Uh-huh.
Is there, this is crazy, is there anyone in the crowd that's capable of judging these two mares?
Oh my.
And the guy stood up in the grandstand, and he pointed to my mare. The
Uh-huh.
one. So, I mean, who ever heard of anything like it? The judge couldn't make up his mind.
You would never hear that today.
No,
Never
the
today.
guy stood up and pointed to my mare. That's
Wow.
I've got a lot of good stories.
So did you get the blue ribbon that day?
Huh?
Did you get the blue ribbon that day?
Oh yeah,
That's great.
yeah. He
That is great.
pointed to me to win it. There's 5 or 6 others in it, but Hopkinsville, to win at Hopkinsville and beat Dick Duncan, that was
Big deal.
pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Dick Duncan managed the Tattersall sale for years after he'd quit and did a good job. Now that's one thing I missed is the old Tattersall sale. Now Jimmy's got a good replacement and he's done a good job of running it. I got to give him credit. He's we're lucky to have it.
Oh, we are. Yes.
Yeah.
He does a great job. Great job.
Yeah.
That was Tattersall's sale. I only went to one time, but I was absolutely mesmerized. It was really exciting
What?
to see Tattersall's. I got to see it one time before it was gone, and so that was a big deal for me.
Yeah.
Because I didn't really know anything about horses at the time. That was a long time ago. But it was fun.
I'm a modest guy. It's hard for me to, but sometimes I have to tell it because I did it, you see.
Absolutely.
But sometimes I back up on some things, and I hate to say this, but I don't understand. I've got the biggest fan club that anybody ever had.
You definitely have that.
And in that fan club is a lot of worshipers. I mean, worshipers that I don't understand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that's just the way it is. But at Lexington, I'd work Perry at night down the shed room
Mm-hmm.
and turn around. I'd put sawdust down at the end and go down and turn around. And I wouldn't say a word about going to work him. But there'd be, a whole crowd of people just about all they were saying to get to see him to turn around. But I had a lot of West Virginia fans. Oh, West Virginia. That's a good horse state, and it used to be really good.
Well, I think you still have a huge fan club.
Well,
I know you did then, but I think you still do.
yeah, and I do. I get to wondering about it, but that's just the way it is.
I
Now,
think it's a good thing.
I've got to tell you something. I've been winning all kinds of classes in my dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I dream and dream and dream. And I've got all these champion horses and winning all these classes. And the other night I had a young gaited horse I was going to bring out. And I thought, boy, we're going to beat everybody with this horse. And I woke up and I thought, I can't do this. I'm too old. So it was a good dream with a bad ending. But I dream all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all good ones.
Well, I think that's wonderful. We all want to have good dreams,
Yeah.
for sure. That's great.
So, let's see, what am I going to say? Oh, nobody ever mentions my fine harness days because I never did really like to drive to start with.
Mm-hmm.
But my gracious, I've had Judy Ottinger. You know Judy Ottinger?
I do know Judy.
Well,
Yes,
Judy sent
I
me
do.
a horse years ago called Rare Decision,
Mm-hmm.
big bay coat, and my help made fun of me, said it looked like a standard bred.
Oh, no.
And I said, hey, listen, you just give him a little time. He changed his mind right quick. He won the fine harness junior class at Louisville.
Mm-hmm.
And then we sold him. He went on, Mary Gaylord had him, she won and won and won. I had a horse called Dr. Something Special
Oh,
that I found out in Missouri. And this is another Simmons thing. I'd been out to Simmons looking at horses. And he said, let's go out to the farm. I got a bunch of good yearlings I want to show you. I said, all right, I'm not interested in any yearlings. So on the way home, I stopped at a fella out in the country called Dude Burden.
mm-hmm.
And Dude, he opened up the stall door, and there was about 15 yearlings.
Oh my goodness.
But there's one in there stood up and looked over the top of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him what it was. Anyway, I bought it. So news travels fast. Art,
Uh-oh.
he found out pretty quick. He said, I thought you weren't interested in a yearling. I said, hey, listen, anytime I find one that looked like this yearling, I'm going to buy it. So it won the 2-year-old harness class for Judy Ottinger. She's a great friend.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like her. She's
Yeah.
she's an old Hoosier too. She grew up in northern Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but that's 2 world champions for her. Then I had a horse called kind of an odd name, but I won the junior class with him at Louisville. Wings Melody Sensation. And then I sold him to I can't think of the people's name, but Billy Walsh was the trainer.
Uh-huh.
And he won the grand championship twice. So you don't hear about those, because I sold them. I won with them as young horses, but I sold them before. But I've had some really good harness horses. And now I didn't make Well Chosen, but I showed him, and he was something. We went to New York with him. Boy, that crowd went crazy.
Oh.
And he was just something. And he won that easy. And then there was looked about like you, a good looking woman interviewed me after that class and said, she asked me a question, said, a horse like that dangerous and some stuff, and I said, she said, I've got it on video, and she said, well, maybe we can go out in Central Park and take it to drive. And I said, okay, I'll never forget, she's nice looking. I'll have to show it to you sometime.
So did you take a horse out in the Central Park from the show?
No, but she
thought it was a good idea.
mentioned it, and I said, well, yeah, maybe we do that. But I didn't do it. But what a horse he was, well chosen. He was a horse that was really strong. And I'd show people, I'd say, look here, I stretched that one arm. they'd take it, but he did. Boy, he was strong. And I found out I started putting some cotton in his ears so he didn't hear all the crowd. That really helped. Then I sold him to, you know Ann Judd? I sold him to Ann Judd's mother. And she won at Louisville, won with him. And but they kept that cotton in his ears, and she drove him and made it look easy.
So he didn't hear all the noise.
But I've had some really, really nice harness horses, but we don't talk about that because we're talking about like the 3-0 walk trot stake at Louisville. I won that 6 or 7 times, and 2 of those years were undefeated all summer.
Wow.
New Estate, who belonged to Mr. Greenberg, we were talking about earlier.
Yes.
New Estate, and what's the other one? Anyway, the 3-0 walk trot class maybe 6 or 7 times. I think the only guy that maybe could top that is Johnny Canatra. He's had a lot of luck with the 3-year-old walk trots. But I never did really like to show. I like to ride, but I've had some really good driving horses. And boy, nowadays that pleasure driving thing is, those things look like and stake horses on my leaky roof circus.
Yeah, they're nice.
I mean, outstanding. In fact, the pleasure division is, I can remember when it just started, and then just, a few horses. In fact, we won the first 5-gated pleasure class ever held at Freedom Hall. And today, I'd be ashamed to get him out working in front of anybody. But he won that twice. Little Missile. He had a good name, good boy, he could go. But he was just a little punched up horse. But you couldn't get by with that today. Because boy,
there's a lot of competition today, and those pleasure classes are particularly full and competitive.
Now we're let's get back to the women just a little bit.
Sure.
I told you about the old timer.
You did.
It was outstanding. But boy, you got to put that, the girl from North Carolina, she and her husband.
Peter and Kim Coward.
Yeah. Now,
I just keep naming teams.
She's outstanding.
Yes.
And Peter's outstanding too. They make one of the top teams in the country.
They do, and I think their daughter is
that
part
daughter,
of the team now.
That daughter, she's something else. I watched her grow up. Yeah. So we get into the women a little bit. Melissa and Melinda.
Both of them, yes.
Both of them.
Absolutely.
And listen, they used to be my catch riders.
And look at them now, right?
I put Melinda on a gray mare, Lexington, won the ladies' stake. And then I had a gaited pony that Mrs. Weldon sent me. What was that name? Anyway, Melissa was the only kid, she was a kid that
Mhm.
could have ridden her. She was a game pony. What was that pony's name? Anyway, they made some good catch riders for me.
I bet they did.
So I've known those girls. I watched them grow up, in other words. And Tom and Donna, they had a little different lifestyles than I had,
Right.
but they were good friends,
Mhm.
But we lived a little different. I think you know what I mean.
I do,
But-
I understand.
But I'm not criticizing them because
No.
it fit them all right.
To each his own.
And
Live
Tom-
and let live.
I remember one year show you about Tom. We didn't see each other much, but we were friends.
Mhm.
I had a cancer removed from my nose,
Mhm.
and he heard about it, and I was supposed to judge the Phoenix show, and he volunteered to go fill in for me. So that's a good friend.
It is, that was
Yeah.
very nice.
Yeah. And now they're talking about a team. That was a team.
Oh, it was,
Tom and
indeed.
Donna. They were a little bit on the wild side, but Donna would get a kick out of me saying that, but they were a little on the wild side.
Mhm.
And I judged Tom several times, never said a word about anything. And one year that Tom was showing Melissa, I believe it was, and Earl Teeter had an outstanding mare. And Earl's mare, she failed to take the left canter lead. I mean, down one side. You know, that's enough to beat you,
Right.
especially if you had some competition. So, Lou Teeter, Earl's son, oh, he jumped all over me. He said, "Oh, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, listen, I'm not going to tie a horse that didn't canter took it one whole side to can." So that satisfied him, and he walked off a little bit huffy. So we go to New York, and everybody thought Earl was going to be mad at me, and Lou mad at me. And Earl invited me over to his box seat to sit.
He understood.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a shame. He had a cancer, throat cancer, that took a couple of years away from him. He showed with it, but it took a lot out of him. But he had to talk, you don't want to talk about it. But a great, great horseman. Now, I think I need to bring this up.
Okay.
I think there's a lot of high-class young trainers. We've already said that. And there's been a lot of old, outstanding old trainers. And the old timers, I mean, they drank, Lee Roby, I saw him, and he's a top one. I saw him show Lexington. And they had let his stirrup down for him to get on, and they didn't take it back up.
Uh-oh.
And they lined up. And old Roby, he couldn't figure out what was wrong. he was, you know, he about halftime. He didn't know what was wrong. And but the old timers were worse about drinking than the young ones. They just, you know, I don't criticize the young guys for taking a drink, but I don't want them to take over on them, which could happen. Now, my son, he had a good future in the horse business, but he had a demon that he couldn't whip. And he convinced me that he'd quit. And it wound up, I'm being personal here, it wound up, I'd take him to the hospital to have his stomach drained. He'd have his stomach out here. They'd drain it 2 or 3 times a week. Cirrhosis of the liver, what it wound up. but he looked like a movie star. Personality, everybody liked him. He had so much going for him. And that runs a lot of lives.
It certainly
And
can.
families.
That certainly can.
So that'd be part of my advice to the young guys. Don't let that alcohol take over, because it'll do it. It'll do it. And same way with the women. There might be a few women that might take the.
I think it's probably equal.
Yeah.
It may not have been historically, but today, where so many more things are equal, that's probably more equal too.
Yeah.
That risk. Yeah. I think you're right. It's good advice for anybody, whether you're a horse trainer or not.
That's right.
We appreciate you so much, all the way around, but we really appreciate you letting us come into your home and visit and talk with you, and we know that you love the museum, and that's really special.
Yeah. You know, Roz, everybody knows that she's the
reason we're there.
She was something else. She raised more money in 2 calls than all the rest of them put together.
Yeah, she's the reason that the museum is there, and she's part of the reason it's as healthy as it is. And, you know,
she's something.
I hate that I never got to meet her, but I've heard so many wonderful things about her.
You never hear anything bad.
No, absolutely.
Now, jump off my mind. These little shows over in Southern Illinois, they'd have entertainment about halfway through the show. And Rudy Valley, going way too far back, Rudy Valley was the Frank Sinatra of his day.
Right.
But this was at the end of his career. But they had Rudy Valley over for entertainment.
At the horse show?
Yeah.
Wow.
In Marion, Illinois. And he was the Frank Sinatra of his day. And then they'd have these, it was kind of they trained what am I trying to say? Because this is a good story. At Harrisburg, Illinois, the entertainment was the dancing girls from out of Chicago. It was a farm club for the big, you know who I mean? The
like the Rockettes in New York. Yeah.
This was a farm club for the Rockettes. So a bunch of pretty girls. And I got to know most of them. And I had a cheering section. And my dad came, when he came to show, he said, "Mama, you sure had a big cheering section." I said, "Yeah, not too bad."
A very attractive cheering session. A very attractive cheering session.
So, I've just had so many things to happen to me. I've just had a life that, and here I am, I'm 90 years old. And it happens almost overnight. I can remember when I was a young guy. In fact, my first trip to Rock Creek, in big headlines back then, the newspaper, you'd get publicity. The newspaper said, up and young trainer dominates Rock Creek.
Well, that was nice.
And then overnight, veteran trainer you go from up and coming to veteran trainer like overnight. Veteran trainer dominates Rock Creek. So that just shows you how life is. And
it goes by quickly.
Oh my, when you're young and your parents tell you that, the older you get, the faster you go, the more you find out what it is. So, General Macarthur, he was one of the most famous generals of World War II. His farewell speech he said, he had a great voice, old soldiers never die, they just fade away.
Yes, I've heard that.
So I'm sitting here today saying old trainers never die, they just fade away. So I'm hoping and thinking that I have a few years left, because we were gonna have this 90th birthday of a big party over at the museum.
I know.
But this virus changed that. So now we gotta wait 10 years for the 100. In fact,
Well, I think that it was sad that we couldn't do a party this year because of COVID, but I do think that we will get to do it another year, and I think it'll be fabulous.
Well,
And
yeah.
all your fan club can be there.
Yeah, so hopefully we can make it another 10 years. In fact, that night I invited all the trainers. I said, now, we're gonna do this again at the 100th, but we decided to do a 90th, but we didn't, this virus is, it stopped a lot of things.
It really has.
Yeah.
There's no question.
Now, we're gonna, I told you I was a basketball player.
Yeah.
And today I'm a basketball nut. I watch it all the time.
So who's your team?
Huh?
Who's your team?
Well, my little town,
Uh-huh.
Elberfeld High School. And I don't mind telling you, I was pretty darn good. And I could jump. I could out jump. Back then a 6'2" center was a big center. Now it's all 7-footers.
Yeah.
I could out jump. In fact, the newspaper, I used to get a lot of publicity in the newspaper. They called me the boy with springs in his legs. And that's from riding.
You had strong legs.
That's from riding. I could jump. I played guard, but I jumped center because I could out jump all these guys. But I couldn't out jump them nowadays. I don't know where the first 7-footer I ever heard of was George Mikan, played for Milwaukee, and he was just a freak. Now you don't think anything about it.
A lot of them are. So what teams do you follow and watch on TV today?
Well,
Who's yours? You know that.
I follow UK,
Uh-huh.
and I follow U of L. And when the two of them play, I lean a little bit towards U of L.
Well, you do live in Cardinal Club.
Huh?
You do live in Cardinal Club.
Yeah. That's good. But I've seen a lot of good basketball players. I turned down a scholarship to Purdue. The horses won out. That's when I decided I wanted to be a horse trainer. And I've got a picture in there when my basketball played day. I'll show it.
Good. We'll have to see that.
I'll show it to you, Jack. There's a picture about like this. The boys all set. Back then, they didn't have a 3-point shot. And all my shots were from 3 points, but they only counted for 2.
Right.
And if you could dunk, it wasn't allowed. It wasn't allowed. And something that bothers me, they have a carrying the ball. You're supposed to be, I guess they've changed. But now what you call carrying the ball, and they never call it. So the rule must have changed, and I didn't know about it because
Maybe I don't know much about basketball.
I'm telling you what, I see this all the time. So we'll cut it off, and if I think of something that's worth doing another session, we'll do it.
Anytime you're ready.
Yeah.
We thank you so much for letting us visit today.
Yeah.